Already chaired at 6 o'clock in your life.
Call to order the Common Council Finance and Human Resource Committee. It's Monday, November 29th, 6 p.m. Councilmember Mark Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember John Rath.
Here.
With all members present, is there any corrections, subtractions, or additions needed to the minutes that were provided on regarding November 8th, on a regular scheduled meeting? Hearing none, accept the minutes as provided. Topic A, firefighter appointment.
Want me to go for it? Sure. So we're looking to promote firefighter Jeff Mundrick. He is currently in the temporary status. We hired him in anticipation of a retirement this fall, which took place. So it's just a natural progression for him to move up to permanent status.
Full-time budgeted. The 24th firefighter.
And he's fully qualified. Are we sending him to school anywhere? He's ready to go hit the streets?
The only thing he has to do in addition to meet his contractual obligations is to do his paramedic at some point, which will be in this coming fall.
And how long of a time period will it be for this firefighter to be trained as an apparatus operator?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear the first part.
How long do you think it's going to take to bring him online as an apparatus operator?
So that's dependent on him and how quickly he picks things up. I mean, we've got individuals that fluctuate. We actually have 3 individuals right now that still are not apparatus operators because I just have higher expectations of them than I think have been held of those individuals in the past. So once they meet them, then they'll be cleared.
So you've created a curriculum?
It's a student matrix, basically. So when we get a new person, they go to the academy, they come back, and then to get cleared, we start them on a specific vehicle, and they have to learn every piece of equipment on that vehicle and how to use it before they even drive the apparatus, because we expect them to, if they're going to drive the apparatus, operate every single piece of equipment efficiently. So yes, we work through the ambulances first, and then we go with each engine, and then we graduate up to the tower ladder, being the hardest one to drive and the most equipment last.
I'm just putting you through this exercise, Ryan, for the benefit of the other 3 committee members, so that they understand that it takes quite a period of time after someone graduates from Proby school to be fully certified and online, ready to be accounted for.
Okay.
So if you could just kind of give them a ballpark of how long it takes once they've had their formalized training to when they're going to be street ready.
I would say a year, probably. I mean, we're looking at some guys that this summer they graduated the academy, they already had their EMT, and we're still working through getting them qualified to drive all of the apparatus and pump it and be proficient in every single piece of equipment on it. So.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Is there any other questions regarding the appointment of this individual to full-time for part-time? Hearing none. Topic B.
Promotion of Philip Kraft, who's a 12-year veteran police officer within the agency, to sergeant. This is a fully budgeted position. He'll be replacing Sergeant Berger as his promotion to lieutenant.
And this promotion's not relying on the passing of the 22 budget.
No.
Any other questions with regards to this topic? Hearing none, we'll move on to topic C.
This is regarding the promotion of Jordan Cologne to wastewater treatment trainee. He currently has been working in our streets crew with DPW. He's, starting on the wastewater plant as an operator training. It'll take about a year, a week before he will move on to operator. Obviously, there'll be weeks of in-house training and then eventually going to get his certification for New York State DEC.
Same question. Is this a budgeted item? Is it reliant upon the 22 passage of that budget?
Yes, it's budgeted, fulfilling the vacancy created by retirement, Scott Berger, and it's not dependent on the 2020.
And the training that this individual requires, will that be dependent upon the budget? Because I remember quite a bit of training had been paused.
No, this would still be in there. This was considered essential training for, to meet their job description.
Good. Any other questions? Topic D.
Greg had mentioned to me that at a recent meeting, I think it was through the budget meeting, Len, correct me if I'm wrong, but there had been some questions that arose regarding the exit interview process and employee retention in general. So he had just asked me to report to you very briefly on kind of our process and the general feedback that we got. And of course, I can answer any questions or prepare any specific data that you would like to see. In general, whenever we have an employee who leaves, they're offered some form of exit interview process, and it depends on the person and the situation. Either they're mailed a questionnaire, or they're offered the ability to come in and have a meeting with me, or it's handled informally, or I email them. More often than not, I find that employees generally don't like to respond to formal prepared questionnaires. So typically they're not all that effective. I find really the most effective way engaging why our folks are leaving are just by having, those informal conversations. Hey, what's going on? Was there anything we could have done differently? Anything we could have done better? Stuff like that. So in general, if we're talking in terms of conceptually, we really only have retention issues in two places, and that's in the police department with our younger officers, which we talked about at length through other meetings, and then in DPW. And in both cases, it looks like people are leaving due to salary. In the police department, hopefully we've taken some steps to correct that through the last contract negotiation, where we reorganized pay throughout the salary structure to aim at greater retention of folks between year 3 and 6, which is where our problem was. And then with DPW, it's just pretty hard right now to be competitive with private sector wages when people look at hourly rates, for, large corporations like McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts, and they're, a few dollars more an hour than us. I think that some of our folks are looking at those higher hourly wages and tending to leave. You've noticed that we've had a lot of hiring going on in DPW recently. And in general, what we hear over and over is just, well, they're offering a lot more money to go work at Lowe's or whatever the case may be. In general, though, I find that, our benefit package, our time off package, and the work conditions definitely offset those lower wages when you look at the total compensation package. But right now, I think it's just a very competitive labor market, and that's generally why people are leaving. So I'm not sure what kind of information I can provide that would be helpful to all of you, maybe.
How much of a negative impact is that on DPW for work flow?
Well, Chris, feel free to jump in, but I mean, from my experience, it definitely has a lasting impact when you have a high rate of turnover. There's obviously a lot of training as in any department goes into learning and fully understanding really being an excellent employee in the department. So in DPW's case, learning their snowplow, some of the newer guys have very little experience running large equipment or operating heavy machinery, so there's a lot of training going on in-house. Learning their snowplow routes, this is something that you're gonna have to go a little bit slower, take a little bit more time. There might be a little bit higher chance of having an incident in your mailbox, or things like that. Hopefully we can avoid it, but those sort of things should just have to be worked through because we don't have the luxury of having them ride along and learn. We have 3 or 4 new ones coming in every winter, it seems. So it's in a bit of a tough spot, but I think they do the best they can. Last winter we had some new guys, and I think by just taking their time and trying to train them as well, we didn't have any major issues. But
correct me if I'm wrong, Case, most of the newer guys, right, the younger crew, so the benefits may not be as, they may not need them, the health benefits, they may not have a family, they may not have children to care for, so they may not be apt to stick around like someone that has a family. So, but retaining is important to us because there is ongoing training, as Craig has mentioned. It's it's time consuming, and you lose those people, and you got to retrain the next group that comes in. It's difficult.
really the type of work that we can do. It's a very, obviously, very broad operation in the city, but the types of things we can do is really depend on the quality of people and skills that they have. In the past, several years ago, we had some guys who were more experienced, had more skills in certain areas, concrete finishing, that sort of thing. We were doing more sidewalk replacement. Right now, we can't really focus on those things until we can get our guys up to a certain level. So it gets to be difficult. You have to kind of focus on, use the resources available to you, focus on their strengths and try to build our stuff to really expand. So we'll see that reflected in the kind of jobs that we're able to do for the next year. Really stick to basics.
It's slower, deep excavations, we really aren't set up to do that. We, like you said, the sidewalks, the finishing of the sidewalks, it's just, we may have had the expertise at one time and we lost it, and just gotta work on gaining it back and hopefully retaining the people that gain the knowledge.
So going into the snow season, Chris, if I'm reading this correctly, you have in your department?
Yes, is that correct? 9 we have, I thought we had 10.
On what we call the streets crew, there are 10 total now, we transferred to one day. We got several, 4 on our buildings and grounds crew, 3 on the parks crew. In the winter, they all kind of take on different duties related to snow and ice control, whether it's sidewalks or street plowing.
I started working for the city back in 1989, I believe DPW had 34.
We did an evaluation recently, John and I, and it looked like we're from the 80s to now. I think when you look at all the staff, parks and rec, building and grounds, water sewer crew, and the streets, I think we're short about 5 to 6 crew members from what it used to be in the 80s. And we're still doing, we're doing a lot of what we have.
Staying along the streets, staying along the sidewalks.
And I feel like we're a little behind too. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, there is.
Obviously, it's about balance and priority, but we'll never be able to accomplish everything that we might think we need to. It really comes down to prioritization.
Katie, I wanted to circle back with you and Chief Witzenberg. We're coming up on the season of recruiting for the new tests. It's almost December. I believe that test is given in June.
It's given in September. It used to be given in June and now it's in September. We actually just today got the results of the exam.
Okay.
So we're, Nancy and I today in my office, we're working on compiling the results of the physical agility test that was already administered this fall by the department, along with the written scores, where we intend to turn the list over to Chris later this week, and so they can get started on background investigations. So we're actually, we're pretty far ahead of where we
We're ahead of
normally
the
are.
curve.
We are typically we haven't been getting the scores until January.
We're about a month ahead right
To
now.
get them a whole month ahead, we're gonna really work hard this month to be sure we're ready to go to make hires for March Academy.
And then what are we doing differently in 22? Or what are we strengthening in 22 for developing an interest in taking the test?
Well, I think that's another one really for Katie, but we found that most of the good recruits that we managed to get through come through word of mouth. The successful hires have come through some changes in hiring practices regarding having part-time dispatchers come through. As far as increasing our numbers, it's a national issue right now. As far as us, we've sent out applications to all of the criminal justice programs in the area. We have outreach to high schools and colleges. We've gone and spoken at criminal justice classes. Last week, actually, I had the detective sergeant went out to Delaware Academy and actually did a presentation at Delaware Academy. So we're trying to do outreach. It's really a matter of timing and interest. I find that the scheduling of the exam doesn't really coincide with job fairs from the colleges very well. So the announcements tend to come out So we don't have any physical applications to hand them in May when they do most of the job fairs. And the application deadline sometime in July for a September test, I think, or August.
So then much to your point, when the exam was given in June before, we were doing the bulk of our recruitment in the spring, when the college fairs, internship fairs, when students were still in school. I mean, now the bulk of our recruitment for the exam comes over the summer. Everybody's home and not really all that interested. So one thing that we tried at a couple different job fairs was we had people effectively, sign up on a list to say, hey, listen, we will email you an application and an exam announcement when it's eventually. And we found that between the time when people signed up for that and then by the time the exam was ready to be announced, people kind of lost interest or their situation changed. So we're really, much to the chief's point, we're at a severe disadvantage with the timing of the exam statewide.
One of the, some of the feedback I got from some of the criminal justice people I work with is that the students typically don't check their email during a summer break. So even if they get them out to the students on their student email, they're just not looking that hard for the testing announcements.
We just really don't have a love for the professors. Any other questions?
Len, is this something you'd like me to update the committee on periodically, quarterly?
I think I was raising the question because we were going through quite a few DPW hires, and it didn't seem like they were staying on very long. I understand that they're competing against private. I just hope that we're not losing DPW folks to another municipality. That's kind of where I was going with
I
this.
can say with certainty that's not the case, providing I'm operating under the assumption that employees are being honest with me about where they're going. But, police officers, yes, of course. It's the only place you're gonna do police work, but with our DPW workers, it's all private sector.
HealthWorks contract renewal.
This is a renewal for HealthWorks through Bassett. It's for specialty occupational medical services. The city contracts with WellNow Urgent Care as kind of our primary provider of return to work physicals, fitness for duty physicals, things like that. This is more specialty medical services like respiratory fit testing for people who need it, firefighter physicals, certain other types of exams that WellNow doesn't typically provide. So the rates really have only gone up by a couple dollars in 2021. They're the only other people in the area that provide the job. So we would like to continue that relationship.
You say a couple dollars per patient or client or per contract?
Per service, so like a specialty physical in 2021, I believe it was $86, it's going up to $88. Fit testing is $26.50, I believe it was $24 in 2021. So it really depends on how many times we need to use those particular types of services in a year.
Any other questions? Who prepared the agenda for tonight's meeting? What's the significance of the asterisks? See, like, there's five or six.
The asterisks were added, yes, the first time we did that, so, we added those to indicate which items had supporting documentation provided with them. In part as a reminder to ourselves to make sure we added those into the packet that Terry put together and sends out, and also to let you know which ones have support.
I appreciate that. It made me, I didn't have to look for it. It was right there. Sometimes I'm wondering if there's something attached, so that was really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
I must have missed the health contract. I did not read all of David's, sorry, David, take no offense to your safety time. I did scrub through it. Just. Topic F.
Okay, so we put out an RFP for the local waterfront revitalization program, and we received proposals for that. We're in the process now of setting up interviews, And I'm hoping that we'll have a selection prior to next Tuesday's council meeting. And we'll have more information at that point of who we select. And if not, then we'll be back at the next finance committee. And then to get it on the next council meeting. And I don't have details yet because we haven't done the interviews yet.
So by the numbers submitted, they're well within your budget.
Yeah, we had a few proposals. I don't want to get into too many details at this point because we haven't done the interviews yet and the selection. But we have very good candidates, so we were pleased with the response. And I think whoever we pick will do a great job. So
And they're just doing the initial study, Judy, that's what they're doing?
they're actually going to be writing, working with the community, both communities, the town and the city, to actually put together the LWRP. It'll be an actual document. It has to be approved by Department of State before we can use it. And once we have it in place, it's gonna touch on resiliency on the watershed. It'll touch on our connections to the watershed. We'll be identifying proposed projects that we want to do to implement and create that connection, a better connection with the watershed or with the riverfront. And once we have it approved by the state, then we'll be eligible to apply every year in the CFA for funding to implement those projects. And that funding could be up to 75%. So it's going to be really awesome. And it'll take, I'm not quite sure yet how long it'll take. We put a 2-year timeline in the proposal, in the RFP. And a few of the responses had an actual shorter timeline than that, which was really good. So it'll be within the next 2 years that we'll actually have a plan and we'll actually be implementing that plan over the next however long. And that thing will stay in place. Eventually we'll have to update it if things change and as we get our work completed that we want to complete, but it's going to be a long-term, really positive thing for both the city and the town.
Any other questions? The OPT Accelerated Transit Capital Application, I believe it was $95,000.
Okay, yes, you were provided with the award letter and it is just over $95,000 and we will need a council motion to officially submit our application for the ATC funds. And what I have in mind for it is to be used towards the transit hub. ATC funds last year and this year, we dedicated both of the allocations to use towards the local match for any of the DOT grants that we get for the transit hub. And with council approval, I would like to submit the same request.
Any questions or objections? Hearing none. Is there anybody with objections to the safety plan that David submitted for our review? Unless, David, you wanted to read that to it?
No, that's quite fine.
I really don't. Topic I.
Want me to start?
Maybe Brian will say.
So the assistance to the firefighter grant, that's, I believe due, was it December 17th?
Yep.
Talking about my future fleet, I'm really looking at trying to get a Quint. And we actually had a meeting, it was Ginny, Judy, myself, Greg, and Assistant Chief Foster. And I was presenting the question to them. Can the city afford for us to go ahead and try and go for this grant application? Because at a roughly $1.5 million price tag, the highest grant award that we can get is $1 million. So before putting in a ton of work, we were, I guess, throwing the question on the table can we somehow come up with $500,000 as a match to be able to push this forward? So, and,
Out of this budget coming up that we're working on,
correct,
I would say no. We don't even have enough money in there to do projects. Well, I know where Genie's gonna go with this, but yeah, with, yes, it's $1 million. That means we're probably gonna have to bond 500,000. That's gonna go on top of all the other projects that we have already that we have to look at in the future. So I don't know. My personal opinion is if you're gonna take your fleet that you have now, you're gonna downsize to a couple pieces of apparatus, I will work hard to find $500,000, but if you're gonna leave your fleet the way it is and just put one more truck in for each truck, I don't see it. I don't see it to try to find $500,000.
well, I certainly have plans to make my fleet more efficient. And I mean, I got a little bit of a presentation if you'd like to hear it, but obviously I know there's a long agenda tonight. If you wanted to save that for council, I can have that conversation. If you even want to take it up to that
Brian,
point.
here's my suggestion on this. It's very, very hard to look at any one item in isolation from all the other priorities. Clearly, a fire truck is not a priority, no doubt. When we had a meeting last week, I don't think you were there, it was just a meeting that on transport. I had asked Jim to take a look at all of the, and I'm gonna call it a wish list because, but it's our capital plan, and the fire truck is on the capital plan for the next few years. There's as much as $20 million in borrow in the capital plan. Some of that is water and sewer, it's not all general fund. There's about 12 million general fund, about 7 million was water and sewer. What I asked Jenny to do is to, in the next few days, hopefully she'll have it for us this week, to let us know what is the amount of additional debt that she is comfortable the city can assume in the next 3 or 4 years. Once we have that number, we can then go to the council and say, here's the list of the things that we want to do or buy, and the fire truck is on that list. And now the council's job is to say which are the top priorities. And so, for example, if there's $12 million in planned expenditures, capital expenditures, borrow that's required, then Ginny says, I'm only comfortable that we can borrow $6 million in the next 3 or 4 years. Then the council has to look at that list and say, which items are the most important that add up those $6 million, so that we can look at everything and prioritize and not look at things one at a time. Because when we look at one at a time, it's hard to make any sense. That said, there's another thing to think about here. You know, I objected to the budget where we were budgeting over $300,000 to out of the fund balance to spend on salaries and other ongoing items. On the other hand, I think that coming up with the balance to buy a fire truck is the appropriate use of a fund balance, because using a one-time expense for an important piece of equipment that you buy once every 20 years, to me, that's an appropriate use of the fund balance. In my mind, we shouldn't spend the money on repeating expenses like salaries out of the fund balance. We should have saved that money, because that's the perfect thing to use for a fire truck. But that ship is out. But at any rate, you know, I think that we need to see Ginny's forecast and how much we can afford to borrow, so the council can then weigh all of these expenses. What's your deadline on that?
The 17th
The 17th?
December, yeah.
I mean, if you go ahead and apply, we can always turn it down. I mean, I know we'll never get it again if we do.
Right.
The truth is, the odds of us getting this grant are very, very small to begin with. It's not a grant that we're likely to get. So I would go
But I
ahead.
don't know, but I'm not really sure I'm comfortable with that either. Why, if you're gonna put in money to get it, then let's come up with the money so that if we get it, we can get it. I think it's a bad thing to put the application in saying, well, we know we're gonna walk away from it too. I mean, like I said, we're going in, we haven't voted on the budget yet. It was laid in front of us. I know at this point, it's like 2/3 majority to change things, but if maybe this is the thing we have to look at and say, okay, let's take some of these positions that we put in for, let's not move them, let's make sure we have this money so we can get this piece of apparatus.
I don't See us changing the budget to 1.5 million, so.
500,000, if we get the grant, they're asking for. It's not 1.5 that we're putting 500. As I said, if they wrote that this is really what we're gonna stick, I will fight hard to try to figure out $500,000.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but we had discussed like other sources as well, but we would, if we couldn't come up with those other sources, then like reaching out to foundations and to, you know, state senators, things like that, to try and get additional funding for it. We do have, what, 800,000 in the Public Safety Reserve Fund. I don't know how much be willing to take out of there for it or towards it, so I just think $1 million for an apparatus, if we could somehow write this up and get it awarded to us, we can't pass on that opportunity. And that's just why I'm presenting to you tonight.
Ryan,
But
what is-
just before Gary spoke, that's exactly what I was gonna say to you, is that we're waiting on Ginny to tell us how much more we can add to our debt services. So for me, I don't feel comfortable moving any more forward in debt without knowing how much more we can actually afford. So when she gets back to us with that, then we can move forward. I apologize on my part that that's not lining up with your fall date of December 17th. But I just don't know how you're gonna gain enough traction with this council to get through the 22 budget for this.
Correct.
Ginny and Brian, what is your concern about using the $800,000 in the public safety reserve for this?
I'm new to this, so I would rely on her for this portion of it.
The rule of thumb that I like to go by for using the reserve balances themselves for the different things is to look at the amount of money that has been taken out in the past couple of years and how much money has been restored. The public safety reserve was around 1.4 million. It's now down to about 800,000. So the past couple of years, we've already utilized 600,000 of the public safety reserve. I did present a proposal to council to consider of adding a little over $700,000 back into the reserves that would increase I think the public safety portion was about 250,000. So I would be comfortable in allocating, some of it from that reserve. There was an idea that I would like to share. If we were to get this grant, Brian and I met with the company that does the fire truck, and they have an installment payment process. And they do it over 10 years, over 15 years. If we got the $1 million for the grant, I don't know if they would let us do installment payments on the balance of the 500,000. We haven't pursued that idea yet to see if we could spread that over a time period, which would lower the installment payment quite a bit. That is one option we haven't considered
It's
yet.
no different than bonding. I mean, it's making payments to a different person.
Right, making payments to a different person, but it would be a standalone that would not go towards our debt limit calculation. And
But it's
Here's
still
what
debt.
I would suggest. I mean, obviously, we need to get a fire truck at some point in the not too distant future. This grant If we get it, that would be absolutely wonderful. It's a really long shot, this grant. It's highly unlikely that we can get this grant. We're also entirely unlikely we're able to be able to afford to borrow $1.5 million. I think when Jenny comes up with her proposal of how much she thinks we can afford to borrow in the next few years, should work on setting an amount, let's say it's $500,000 to be borrowed. So in other words, look at that priority. We're not saying there's $1.5 million, something that we want to prioritize borrowing. Say $500,000. And then then we know that we have to go after $1 million from other sources. So if the council says we prioritize $500,000 of borrowing towards that truck, we now know we have to go after state grants, we have to go, we have to work with our legislators, we have to work with our local foundations, we have to do bake sales, whatever it may be. We know that we have, we got commitment from the council to borrow so much, and now we need to go full court press to get whatever the balance is, whoever sources.
And also looking at the 5-year capital plan, Mayor, for the other public safety items that are in there going out for year one through year 5, there's other things that are on that list that the reserve would be used for also. So that's why I'm saying taking that big of a chunk out at once, it limits us for the future.
I would also say though that some of those big ticket items are other apparatus because everything has been condensed down. So it's really putting my fleet in a difficult spot. And if we continue pushing and pushing and pushing, we're gonna have vehicles that are just completely out of service. And we might have to rent stuff. And so, I mean, it's a double-edged sword here.
So I think we need to do two things. One is hear from Jenny in the very near future, how much money we can afford to borrow in the next few years. And then you and Jenny, and I guess Chief Witzenberg, because the public safety reserve is used for both of you, need to decide how much you're comfortable saying from that reserve you would set aside for this truck. So then we know how much we're comfortable borrowing. The council says we can set aside so much in our borrowing power. You say we can set aside so much for the reserve. We then know what the balance is that we have to get from other sources. And then we have to all put together a plan to go after those other sources. The first step is to have those two numbers.
So that can't get done before December 17th. I mean, we're gonna have to commit to the match when we submit the application. But it's unlikely we'll be committing to the full 500,000.
I think we can. Jenny can have those numbers for us by tomorrow.
Okay, if council doesn't commit to
We
the
can
full,
discuss it at next week's council. And Jenny has the numbers for us this week.
okay, if the council does not commit to the full 500,000, we still need to commit to the match in the application.
What is that? How much is the application?
The match would be the match would be 500,000. And if council doesn't commit to the full 500,000, we still need to commit in the application to the full 500,000. That council is committing to that. Whether it's a combination of donations and stuff, but if we don't have donations and things, we're still committing.
Once we
To the
see,
full amount.
once Judy tells us how much she's comfortable the council can borrow in the next few years, then the council can look at the whole list of priorities and decide in the next week whether they're comfortable putting $500,000 as a top priority out of whatever number Jenny comes up with. At the same time, we need in the next couple of weeks a decision on the transit hub. How much are you willing to borrow for the transit hub? That'll come out of this same discussion. Is Levis Highway still going to be in the mix? Is West Street still going to be in it? Is West Broadway still going to be in it? So it's tough, but that's where we're at. And I think it can be done in time for your application. I think, we can have this discussion at next week's council.
So I need to start it, because I'd have 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks if I wait till the council on the 7th. So I need to start it now, and I guess we would just need to stop it after council if you don't commit. But just
It
know
doesn't
I have
hurt
to
to
work on
pre-
it.
It doesn't hurt to preview the application, start working on it. But I mean, we can't give you a definite now if we're gonna do it or not, that's.
You know, all the work you're gonna put the application on, all of it, a lot of it is going to be stuff we need to go after the money from other sources. You know, if we're gonna go ask our state legislators to come up with money for us, we need to hand them the basics of what's in that application to help them justify fighting for it. If we're going to apply for other grants, we're not going. So it's not gonna be a lost effort.
Okay. I have to say it again, I just want it clear that you will have to commit to the full match, whether it's your funds or not. And then if we get the grant, which there's $414 million, they're projected to award 2,500 across the country. But if we do get the award, then you've got to come up with that match. Or give it back, and like Gary said earlier, if you have to give it back, you'll never get another one. So, all right, we'll get started on it then.
Judy, how often does this grant come up? Is this annual?
Typically every year. I don't, it did come up last year, you looked
It
at it,
did, yeah.
right? It
We
did come
applied
up before
for-
COVID. We applied for it in 2018 for,
For the same project.
yeah, it was a less expensive Quint. But it didn't have the capacity that they do now and more expensive now. And we didn't get it.
You know, what I do remember is George Norcal was very familiar with this grant. I was not. And he said, right before we applied, he says, we'll never get it. He told me why, I don't remember the reason.
At that time, we had over $1.2 million in reserves. And that really hurt us. I believe that's a major reason we didn't get it. There's probably other reasons. We looked it up today. Brian asked me to find the denial letter. And so I looked that up today. They didn't give us any reason. They just said we didn't score high enough. And there was no way to find out what our score was. They didn't offer that. But I'm assuming that that reserve made a big difference. Plus the amount we're asking for. A lot of communities get small, very small grants, like they go in for they go in for the protective gear, the turnout gear, they go in for the
And then that's what it was.
air stuff. I don't know all the,
That's the DA.
Young boys would give masses.
so they go in for 75,000 to 100, and they offer a lot of grants at that level. $1 million is a big bite.
So we don't want to reoccurring what if, just throwing it out there, Brian, you know your department better than I do. And I know we really gotta get the guys outfitted with turnout gear. This should really have 2 sets. What if we did try for that? And give us some time to try to figure out funding streams and go work with the donors and start doing that way.
I mean, the one concern I would have with that is 10 years down the road, we need to then save enough money to buy all that gear over again, which based on my experience in the past, I think it's better to do like every 5 years where you do like 6 sets for like a crew, 6 sets for a crew. And then instead of that lump payment, and then we don't necessarily get in the position we're in now where we have to buy 17 of 24 sets. So I mean, that's,
Well, you still would do your rotation plan even after we got it, you'd still go out and buy a couple sets every year, which you gotta do. You know, we'd have a slight break, but then you'd start it right back up again. You wouldn't wanna go 5, 6 years down the road, but you can start it back up again to do your rotation plan, so. But I'm just trying to think, what could help us here in the city and help your department out at the same time. Because it sounds like no matter what, the truck's gonna be a long shot on this grant. But if we could get something that could really help us out on the grant and give us time to work with the donors, and like I said, try to go out and find and work with our states and federal, and it's just an idea, just something to think. I mean,
I just think this grant opportunity for the amount that you can get would be better utilized for a bigger purchase, like the turnout, or not the turnout gear, the Quint. Or maybe we don't get a Quint, maybe 5 years down the road, we can be a little bit less and get an engine out of it, because we're still gonna need that too down the road. So, and if they're doing these every year, I mean, I believe the mayor said in the last common council meeting, or one of the common council meetings, about, like, we just can't afford these big ticket items without reaching out to other entities and getting some donations or getting other funding for this stuff. And turnout gear, I think, is something that we can manage in a budget versus something like a fire apparatus.
Jimmy, I got another crazy idea. Ultimately, when we buy a fire truck like this, let's say it's 1.5 million, we pay for 2/3 of it, the town pays for 1/3. It's ultimately, I mean, that's how it plays out, because if we take all of our expenses on the fire department, goes into the formula, and the formula is 2 to 1 after we take our revenue into account and all the expenses are divided on a 2 to 1 basis. Now, I know what we tend to do is we tend to be really nice to the town, and we say, don't worry, we can pay, so we can amortize it for you, and you can pay off your 1/3 over the next 25 years. Or whatever the life of the truck is projected to be. But in the meantime, the city's being asked to come up with some of this in cash. Should we not be going to the town? I mean, they need this truck as much as we do. It protects them as much as it protects us. They're gonna have to pay for 1/3 of this truck. Should we not be going to the town and saying, there's gonna be $500,000 commitment if we get this grant? Will the town, would the town agree to meeting 1/3, $60,000 in that 500,000? Why is it that the city comes up with the cash, but yet the town gets to pay it off over 25 years? They're just as responsible for the cost of operating the fire department as we are on that prorated basis.
On all, according to our contract with the town, a section of it for on equipment purchases, it's agreed in the contract that they pay their portion through the depreciation process. They do not have the cash reserves that the city does as far as being able to, come up with their portion that quickly. And as we met with, the town this year, as far as their increase in their contract, they had to go over their tax cap to do it. So it's just part of the contract, Mayor, as far as the equipment purchases. So we could always go to them, and in our meeting, we did talk about contacting the town to let them know that we were looking at this purchase.
Because the towns will struggle, even if amortized, they're already had to raise their tax cap because of the increase in the fire contract. It's probably gonna go up even more in the next couple of years, plus we have these purchases on, it's gonna go up. They're gonna struggle to stay within the tax cap and meet their obligation.
So just
I
kind
think we
of,
should be talking to the town about maybe strategizing together how to pay for it.
just kind of recapping this, is there anybody objecting that unfortunately Judy's gonna have to put time and effort into it? If she feels she needs the time between now and December 7th to gain a leg up on the application. Does anybody think that she shouldn't put that work into it? And moving forward in the timeline is that we're waiting on the answer from Ginny of how much more depth we can put on, and then we can look at all the projects citywide. Is anybody saying no? I think that's your answer, Judy, what you were looking for.
I'm not sure she was looking for that answer.
I don't know what I was looking for.
Well, is it a answer? It may not be. the
Well, I
most
think you've been
desired.
at this long enough that you knew that, if you put this on the agenda, what was gonna happen.
Maybe just not to belabor this whole conversation, we just ask one clarification question. Brian, probably for you, Jenny, maybe for you, but that replacement of fire truck, would we be able to expect to be able to sell this in what the ways that we usually do, be able to get something back for this truck?
I mean, it's over 20 years old, and Charlie says it's pretty nasty underneath, so. I mean, there is some value there, I don't know how much, I wouldn't expect a lot.
Right now, that's even salvage, and,
I think there's a little more value than that, but
thanks.
I would leave that up to Charlie for putting a number on it.
Okay, so, on topic 5, we'll, I guess we'll look for an answer from Jim and Judy on that a little later date. Topic J, you're looking for approval from this committee for the water and sewer rate tables that you presented.
What I'm looking for is that it needs to be brought to council to be voted upon. So I wanted to bring it through this committee to let you know that there will be motions for council for the water rate tables and also the sewer rate tables, correct? And they'll will be presented at the December 7th. So I wanted to just bring it through this committee, and I provided the tables that we discussed during the budget process.
You did. Any questions? The only one that I have is I just wanted to recap. This is a 10% increase on both water and or sewer rates
Yes,
for 22. And you're looking to do the same thing in 23 and 24
correct.
at 10%.
Correct.
And then after that, it would be.
It'll start to decrease. It'll go from 9 and then 8 and then down to 2. And obviously, if we get infrastructure grants, that will change our need because we won't be carrying the debt. And but for this moment in time, that's the plan. Also, if we bring on more customers, you know, it's always evolving depending on what happens.
Any questions or comments or refusal to move this up to full council?
Just a word of warning about the grants. By the time we get those grants, we're probably not going to be able to apply them to the projects we've already begun. So it's not going to really reduce our debt because it's going to require us, it's going to have to apply for new infrastructure projects, which means we'll need additional matches to take on more debt. So we're not going to be able to use this current infrastructure money probably retroactively to reduce the amount we have to borrow on the projects we already planned.
Correct, Mayor, but we have future projects
Right.
that we've got anticipated in the rate structure increases.
Oh, they're already built.
Yeah, they're already built in there.
Okay, good.
So if we do get the infrastructure, then hopefully those debt projections will come down.
Judy has something.
Yeah, if the water and sewer, if some of the water and sewer funding comes through the DRS or DWSRF or CWSRF, which is Clean Water SRF and Drinking Water SRF programs, those are retroactive, depending on, as long as we're not into construction yet on some of them, and some of them even then they're retroactive. But most of the other infrastructure is not. But that's a unique quirk that those programs have.
Well, that's good.
Topic K,
I'll be brief on this one because we're actually going to bring this back to the next finance committee. We thought we would have a resolution on this with an exact number for this meeting. We don't have it quite yet. Gino, the engineering office, is still coordinating with the contractor to finalize what we think will be a change order to increase the budget and the contract amounts of donations for the Patel Raw Water Transmission Line Rehabilitation Projects. We're thinking somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000 over budget, is what we'll be looking at, but again, that's not finalized yet, and I don't want to bring a question mark through the committee, so we can bring it back to the next one. This project now is complete. The changes will be due to some issues that were encountered during construction, and we added some additional straps to secure the pipe. Things that came up, we had to add additional quantities. So that will be coming back to the next meeting.
Topic L.
This you'll recall, I believe it was December of 2020, we initially entered into a contract with Global Intel to provide that tool. The attachment, this is an investment assistant, economic development tool. It's on our website now. We have that free for 1 year. If you want to continue that, there's costs. And we've also had a proposal just this month from local intel for an additional tool, quality of life advantages. We talked about that at the previous meeting. Both planning and finance, both committees were generally in support of moving forward with those tools, paying for them on an annual basis. At that time, we didn't have an updated quote or a funding source identified, so I should look at that today. The quote is for a 3-year subscription annually, approximately $4,882 for both of those tools, which are entirely managed by local intel. They're on our website. There is some information that we can add to increase the value of those, but there's not a huge lift on the part of carrier or anyone in our office about it. Based on the conversations that happened last week, some team support. So, Jenny, I think we talked about potentially contingency of the 2021 budget to pay for this now in December. Give us another year. We have to come back next December, assuming that we're having the service and we're continuing to find the additional $4,882. This is not included in either the 2021 or the 2022.
So if I read the contract that Gary signed in 2020 correctly, we could just move forward with what we already have for the 22, $2,900.
We could opt to do just the one we have now. If we're asked, I believe we could pick either one. But what was discussed previously, forward to moving forward.
But the other set of tools, basically what, another $1,900, something like that.
To clarify, we're going to the just not the extra 19.
No, none of it. Right.
Correct, this is not in the budget.
I think we've taken out the $5,000 just for the street, summer street closures, correct? That's in the budget, so. Thoughts from the committee? Adding another basically $5,000 debt. And if you sign this, you're committed for three years, right? So if you want, or can you do it?
I think the annual price, if you want 1 year time, is a bit more.
Yeah, sure. He didn't change it. According to the contract, it's 4882 each year.
I believe that's based on.
Oh, based on
3 years. I think if there was a 1 year thing.
I'm sorry, Greg, I didn't bring that with me.
It was a little high.
It wasn't huge amounts to go to next year. And to end the service, we pay the difference.
Oh. Are we on the hook legally, Jenny, for this year?
I'm sorry.
Are we on the hook legally because we signed this contract?
No, I believe it's if we choose to continue it.
Mark, what's your thoughts?
I always want to look at, what's the benefit? What's the value of this? I understand what it does, but I want to understand how does it work in terms of providing value to us?
Yeah, I know that question was raised. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I heard that was the question that you raised. And I think it's one of these things where not everything that counts can be measured, right? Economic development is a result of many different things. Not all of them can be measured, and not all of them that can be measured can tell what's having the impact and what's not. So, is this tool something that is going to impact economic development? It's just one piece of the puzzle that may have an impact, that may add to the cumulative effect, but there's certainly no other.
Can we find out how many click-throughs we had? Because I thought that was part of the software, so we could find if there was some activity. to it.
Yeah, I did ask that question, if there were any sort of data existing, just as relevant to the didn't really have anything to provide, but they did say that there would be statistics, usage statistics for each of the. It's not sure exactly how that will. There is something available based on. Maybe Judy has more.
I don't not relative to right now, but as we're developing our Survive and Thrive marketing effort, we're in the process right now of getting the landing page designed and developed. And those statistics and that place on our website was going to be a place that we'd be sending people to look for information on the city. So I think if we had it and we get through our marketing effort, we'd be able to gauge at that time if that had any impact on the numbers. Because right now we don't really have anything directing people to that other than people just popping on our site. But, like I said, if that's there, we'd be targeting people to that and we'd get an idea of what that marketing effort was accomplishing relative to the data.
So this company did track the click-throughs in 21.
I don't know, do you guys know that?
We haven't received any information.
Well, Greg, we have a little bit of time. It's signed December 28th. You want to see if there's some data that was collected during 21, so we can make a more informed decision on whether this is of value. I mean, maybe there was only 10 people that clicked through it. I don't know.
Going back to the 13th.
Yeah. Mark, is there something that you can think of specific that would?
I guess I understand also the point that Judy raised. What we're doing here, the data I'm looking for might not inform this decision because the fact that we haven't had the signpost directing folks in the right way. So unfortunately, we're making a decision based on hoping that this data will, or that this software will work and or be effective and that we'll be able to, with this $15,000 investment over 3 years, will basically push people in the right direction. So I guess we're taking a leap of faith with very limited data.
I think what Judy's talking about though is the marketing aspect, right? The surrounding guys, the marketing.
Right.
So if we had this data from this company now for 21, at least we would have a foundation or stepping stone to know through the marketing, did it go up? Was it more activity going to this particular information? I mean, it's a good tool. I got on there originally.
I mean, I don't know if it's worth it. I have no idea if it'd be worth it or not, but it would help the marketing effort and having that data there for people to go to, we could say that.
Okay.
And I don't know if our landing page can track who's going there. I can check with our,
I'm curious, technology.
Yeah, we run Google Analytics, so I can tell you how many people have clicked on the page. I can't tell you because it's a third-party site, the extent of its use. Of the last 2,000 views on our website, only 8 of them, or 0.3% have been to that location.
So 8 people went to this tool.
There were 8 views. I can't tell you specifically if they were individual IP addresses, but
And part of the
Could
problem
have been,
is
a couple could have been me.
it's buried on our website.
Oh,
It is.
I didn't even look for it.
Right, you have, I mean, if we're doing this, there should be something, really big right on the front page, that says, learn more about Trump going out there. I mean, so it's buried.
Yeah.
It's part of the problem. of our website.
We're open for business. Go here.
So it's really not very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, if one of those 8 opens up a great big business here, it's worth every penny,
Absolutely.
but how do you know?
In the meantime, Jenny, can you find $5,000, please?
There is funds available in the contingency, yes.
I'm in support of bringing it to the full council for discussion.
You don't want that to happen.
Was that it?
Yeah, you're right. Yes, a little bit. Well, there's no problem. That was 8 people. All right, you guys see how honest they are. What in John?
It's you don't know what it's doing.
Right. So do you want to move it up to full council?
Sure,
now?
and with the same caveats that we have as much as information as possible about it, or if it's value, what it's doing. So far, or what can we do to enhance its use?
Okay. That's $5,000. Well, it looks like you have enough support to get us to full council. We're just going to leave the charge on. They're surplusing the street.
Actually, at this point, Mark Traffic is leading the charge on.
Topic M.
Yes, we're going to be surplusing our street sweeper number 245. We want to put it on the auction international at a minimum bid of 5,000, according to Charlie's estimate. And the other sweeper will be surplus in the spring. And hopefully we want to have a minimum bid on that of 10,000. And the reason we came up with these dollar figures is that was what the trade-in value was offered to us. But Charlie thought we would do better through auction.
So you're gonna put a minimum bid of 10?
A minimum bid for this particular one of 5, it'll be 10 for the other one.
Anybody objections to this? If none, we'll move on to topic N.
I just want to prepare you that there's going to be several motions for council on December 7th, and it will be for the tax levy itself, the adoption of the budget, the re-levies, and the water sewer rates that we've already discussed. And I just didn't want you to be surprised when you saw the motions on the agenda.
Questions? Hearing none. Wastewater treatment plant, bid award.
Yes, the current contract that we have with the vendor allows us to have 3 one-year periods of extensions of the contract. This would be the first year for the extension. And it's a 15% increase. And John Jansen, purchasing agent, communicated with Chris Pellegra from the wastewater treatment plant, and he is good with the prices. And obviously it depends on as far as the price increase on an annual basis. It will depend on how much he uses, but my guesstimate, it's ranging between 1,800 and 2,500, depending on how much he buys. I took a low year and I took a high year in the past few years, and that'll be about the price increase for the product.
So you're covered in the 22 budget?
Well, we have an estimate in the 22 budget for his polymer, and again, it's just based on how much he uses. And, you know, he may spend it all, or he may not spend it all, or he may need more, just depending on the activity of the plan itself.
So in that line item, you're covered for the 15% increase.
We're covered for an estimate of the amount that he thinks he's going to use. And yes, we did increase it, but can I tell you that, you know, we did it, I'm based on these exact prices now, but there is an estimate in there for his column.
Do I recall correctly, maybe I'm wrong, that at one point we spoke about, Greg, that all the work we're doing on wastewater treatment plant was going to make it more efficient in its use of chemicals like polymer, and we would have to start using less of it after because the work that was being done.
Yeah, potentially in some cases, I mean, something like a new belt press would make a difference. Yeah, there's a certain level of variability in that we can't really predict it will necessarily go down, again, based on pricing and based on other factors, but, you know.
No,
I can't-
I don't mean dollar wise, but use wise, with quantity. I thought I remember last time we approved this last year, it said that maybe I'm mixed up with something else, that quantity would go down.
We could potentially see a decrease in the usage of the belt press. Do you agree with that, Chris?
I agree with that.
I don't think that necessarily anywhere else, and I can think of, we would see a decrease based on what was done in this upgrade, but the belt press is new, it's a more efficient, hopefully, machine.
But what we do, to answer your budget question in a little bit more detail, is we look at the averages of how much chemicals the plant uses, and average the prices, and then we apply an increase towards it as far as prices going up.
Right, I understand that you're using trending costs to get you there.
Mhm.
All I'm asking is, did you cover the cost? So that you're not gonna come back and say, I need a little extra money out of XYZ fund to cover the increase of the 15%.
Well, I can't guarantee that because I don't know how much he's going to actually end up using. The budget includes an estimate,
Okay.
and the actual will be based on the actual activity.
I don't see.
The uniform and linen bid award, the city received 2 bids for the uniform and linen rental, and this was for the time period of 2022 to 2024. The bids were not apples to apples. The purchasing agent had to do a lot of work with one of the vendors because they did not answer the bid as requested. So one of the one that did not answer the bid correctly does not offer linens which are used by the Oneonta Fire Department. And they also do not supply the soap dispensers that we have included in the bid. And they also do not supply the Turkish rag. So it was very hard for the purchasing agent to compare the bids. But after receiving additional information from the one vendor, he was able to fairly evaluate the bids after some discussion. But what he would like to recommend is staying with our current vendor, even though the price is a little bit higher. It's about $1,500 higher on an annual basis. But that is because it will offer all of the linen services needed by the fire department, and it will also offer all of our soap supplies that we need throughout the city. So he would like to offer it to that company.
Any objection? I think you.
The camera van, as you know, we've approved the purchase of the camera van. Now we need to approve the purchase of the camera itself. This is through a cooperative bid through the HGAC buy, and it's a little over $69,000. This is included already in the budget. It's being funded 1/3 between the general water and sewer. The water and sewer, it's actually coming out of the reserve funds. It is not in the general fund. So I'll just need to, I'll bring a motion to council to award the bid for the camera itself and to approve the use of the reserve funds, just like we did for the camera van.
Question. And that number is the number was presented before, the 69.
Yes.
Topic R.
We have a tenant at the airport who was unable to get access to his aircraft during the construction period. I think it was June, July, and August. He has requested that his rental agreement be reduced because he wasn't able to get to the aircraft. This is a lease agreement that gets signed, and only council has the authority to adjust any of these rent agreements. So we would like to bring it to council for approval to reduce this tenant's rent. And I don't know, Len, if you can advise if other rentals, any other tenants were not able to get to the aircrafts during construction or not. But we just need, I do not have the authority to adjust his bill that's already been produced. Only council has that authority. And I did double check it with Dave Merzick because it is a lease agreement that only the council can approve that.
So this is the only one that has raised or asked for a reduction. I believe he's the one that pays for it in full at the beginning of the year. He's looking for all 3 months to be zeroed out. And I suggested a 25% reduction. We never once received a request for him during those time period of reconstruction of the apron to help facilitate him getting in or out with his aircraft. There was never a request that I know of. So I was suggesting to the city staff to do a 25% reduction in those 3 months.
Was he notified of the construction? He might not be able to get to his aircraft, so he can.
All the tenants were notified. I believe the chairman of the airport commission took care of that. I mean, if you guys feel that a higher amount of reduction needs to be implemented.
He was notified, he could have made arrangements. He didn't ask, he didn't call, he didn't try to come out. I'm happy just to say, it's not you, buddy.
And do you know that, did he ever need the aircraft and was he able to access it because of this construction?
Until city staff had called me, I have not known of any objections to the tenants of Henry D. This was raised and it was presented as if he wants all 3 months to be zeroed out.
We just assumed that when we went into this construction, we were not planned, part of the plan was that people could not use their aircraft for 90 days. I mean, I'm sure we had a plan to make it accessible to them if they needed it.
Right, our largest tenant is Dan Bentley in the main terminal, and there was times where we actually had to help create an apron for them to get aircraft in and out of that space for him. So this particular individual could have had the same actions, but I didn't hear of any requests, so.
What do you recommend, then?
I would-
You're closest. to
I know, that's why I spoke to the city staff with this. That's why I was just recommending 25% reduction for the 3 months.
What is the total that he got for 3 months?
I think Hangar D is $250 a month
250,
per month.
so it's a 7.
Right, so 750, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just recommending 25%. But
It's about 200 bucks. That'll be about 200 bucks.
But you're recommending 25%
25%.
of the 3 months.
Correct.
That's what you're saying 25% of the entire year is what you're saying.
I'm saying 25% of the 3 months of $750.
Gotcha.
I'm just having a hard time because they were notified this was going on, they knew what was going on. We helped other tenants up there, make sure that they could get in and out. They didn't approach us that you know of, that they were having problems getting out and they wanted to go, then. I mean. I know it's done the spot over a couple $100, but. I mean, also on the same token, where do we start drawing the line when people keep coming up as we're doing it? I mean, what happens if they do River Street in front of my house? Can I go to Bridge and say, hey, I couldn't get it out of my driveway, you know, and I need a little bit of money back, you know, off my taxes for this, because I couldn't use my driveway, I couldn't go my road.
I believe we give a discount to the folks that pay, right? It's basically you get 1 month off,
Yes.
so he already saves by paying up front. John, how do you feel? Do you want a reduction or no reduction?
I just don't know enough about the history. I went to bring up, what was his assertion about what he's lost? Lost access.
Right. That's what he's saying, is that he had no egress or ingress to his, which is not necessarily true. He could have requested to have his aircraft removed and brought across the apron work. Yeah, we did this for Dan Valley, so.
We have arrangements.
We did have the
last.
Right, we did have the ability to do that. That was part of the contract with Bolin, who did the apron work.
Was that explained in the letter?
I don't think I ever put eyes on the letter that went out. Carrie, do you remember?
The letter indicated that the contractor for the airport has advised us of their intent to begin the reconstruction project in 2014. As such, there will be periods of time where your aircraft's hangar will be inaccessible. To eliminate any issues with access, we advise tenants that they may park their aircraft in alternative locations on the airport property. To further discuss options available to you, please contact Mike Stevens as soon as possible and provide it.
Sounds like it's an informative letter that could have generated a request from him for some accommodations, or he had the right to say, I'm out of it.
Right.
I'm taking my plane elsewhere.
Correct.
So it sounds like I think we did a great deal to inform him.
Okay.
And what's the worst that can happen?
He doesn't renew his lease. I have 2 no reductions on the other one. I'm just looking at you.
Yeah, I don't know. On one hand, it's a couple $100. On the other hand, as Scott suggested, I don't know where to be the lines. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one, to tell you the truth. Is there a wait list on these hangars, or are we struggling to find tenants for these?
We don't have a waiting list, but we have interest each month. In fact, I just had Mike clean out a hangar that was being utilized by a third party that we got a relationship with. And as soon as he cleaned it out, there was an interest in it. So that was in hangar B. So hangar D is the upper hangar, which is generally the most requested one. So if somebody wants to rent that,
The
that's.
plane stayed in the hangar during this.
They did.
Sounds like you had use of it. In my thinking, the only risk was losing a tenant, but if there's active interest in these, then I think it was adequately explained to this particular individual and all individuals that they could have called and made arrangements.
Correct. So we'll have to bring this up to the full council. That'll be a no reduction in the lease agreement, no adjustment.
We're not asking for any action.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think I need an action by the council if it doesn't get through committee.
Yeah.
So,
the council.
Are you then you
don't-
turning it back over to me as the airport manager to
Oh, I can
tell the
contact him.
tenant that he's not going to see a positive or negative adjustment?
No, I can contact him.
Okay.
That,
I don't mind making contact. It's just
Yeah, no, I'll contact them. And,
I don't have the authority to do that.
so, and to make, to extend this conversation just a little bit, I just wanted to bring it to the committee's attention that a staff member told me, and Lenny, you probably know more about this, is I don't know if this is the same individual that's taking, he's doing improvements to our building. Is that an accurate statement? Because that concerned me when I was told that a private individual was making changes to city property. Is that,
I don't think,
don't think
I
so?
don't believe so.
Okay, so I wanted to bring that
I
to
don't
your
believe so.
attention, to just confirm that we weren't having private work done on a city building.
Private person should be working on city building unless we-
What I was told, and I didn't know it was true, and if it was true, that's why I wanted to ask mine here, so.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I misunderstood. I
Yeah.
apologize. I misunderstood.
No.
is there any other items? Is there a need for an executive session? Gentlemen?